Join lifelong Star Wars fans Lauren and Steph as they dive into the world of Star Wars fan fiction, discussing a new fic each month, breaking down the writing style, characters, canon relationship, and more. This is your source for Star Wars fan fiction recommendations. So come on and find out why it's one hell of a fanfic.
Hey y'all, I'm Lauren, and welcome back to One Hell of a Fanfic, where we talk about a new Star Wars fanfic every month. And tonight I am here with Steph. How's it going, Steph?
It is going fantastic. How about for you?
It's great. You know what? This is our 12th episode, which means that we've been doing this a year.
Yes.
I can't believe it. We've been reading fanfic for a whole year. Crazy. But yeah, and tonight we are reading for our 1 year episode. We are reading You Shall Become Me by jedipati. And this was a very interesting fanfic because it kind of puts a different spin on the whole Sith, like what makes someone a Sith. So that was pretty fun to explore.
I agree. It was a fun one to read. So this one was finished back in 2016 and was about 25,000 words. So you're looking at like a 3.5 hour read. There was no spice whatsoever. We will be fixing that hopefully next time. Read all the spice. But this one was great. It did not need it. It was canon divergent or alternate universe. It's kind of hard to tell. Those ones always get mixed up. Back to tropes, because tropes always gets me. I never know what to put it as. But this one seems to be a fixed fic also. But would you put it in any of the other categories?
It definitely has fixed fic elements to it. I would say we've also got some found family stuff, which, I mean, I feel like anytime we've got a fanfic with Anakin and Obi-Wan, there's found family vibes because just of the nature of those characters. So yeah, I would say those are probably the two strongest tropes that we see in this one.
Yeah. So fun things about this. I learned a new term this month, and it's podfic. Podfic simply refers to an audiobook made by just kind of whoever of a fan fiction. So it's not an official audiobook, obviously, because they can't, but podfic. And there is one from this. I did not write down who did it, but I do have that link and we will share it so that if you want to go and read this, you can read it or you can listen to it, which I did both. I read the first half and listened to the second half so I could do dishes.
That's smart. There you go.
Yeah. And the person who read it, she did great with the voices. Did like different inflections for different people and accents. It was great. All of that work that people, you have the fanfic writers who just spend so much time writing fanfic. You can tell how much like time and effort they put into it. And then you have people like this who are just like, you know what I'm going to do? Spend a long time editing and reading.
Yeah. Man, I can't even imagine what that would be like. But that's really cool that they made a audiobook slash podfic version of
Podfic.
this. Yeah.
And you can find that on Archive of Your Own too, which I did not know they had a whole section for those. But we'll link that along with it in the description. What was this fanfic about?
Well, first I will read the author summary, which will be spoiler free. This is the notes that the author included at the beginning of the fanfic. And it goes, the Guardian of the Sith Temple doesn't particularly care for the new breed of Sith, for all that they've been around for 1,000 years. But they're the only Sith the Guardian knows about, until one day, alternately, how to accidentally join the Sith without really trying. So, that's given us a little taste. We're going to be seeing some stuff about the sort of the rights of how someone becomes a Sith and the rules around that. We're going to see that kind of a little flipped upside down in this fic. But Steph, why would you recommend this fic to someone?
It really kind of comes out and surprises you about what it's about and how well it's written. And if you are like the Clone Wars, that TV show, if you're a fan of that show, you're going to love this. There's so many references to different people. And it's funny and emotional. I cried, I laughed, and it really does take those like bits and pieces of Star Wars and kind of mixes them in and puts a new spin on them. And it even has Legends references. So that is fun to me.
Yeah, pretty significant Legends references too, which we'll
Yeah.
get to here in a minute. Yeah, I agree with everything that you said. Like it's covering some different types of moments. Like it's not all funny and it's not all emotional. It's got like a really nice blend of everything in there. And I would say what really stood out the most for me is just the way that the Sith lore is explored in this fic and sort of the way that the author presents that to us through a particular character that's in this fic that really, I don't know, kind of made the fic for me, honestly.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I just really like what they're doing with the subject matter in this one.
All right. Are
Okay.
you ready to move on to spoilers?
Yes, now I will give my long plot summary. I wrote it out and I'm looking at how long this is. It will probably be briefer when I actually say it. I wrote an essay. No, so okay, pretty much what happens in this fic is Obi-Wan and Anakin, they follow Count Dooku to a Sith temple. They're trying to capture him. This is during the Clone Wars. And when they follow him to this temple, there is a guardian of the temple who is a ghost type of figure. And the ghost is of a Sith named Lord Riven, not to be confused with Revan. Lord Riven with an I. And pretty much this guardian informs them, well, after Anakin faces Dooku, kills Dooku, this guardian informs them that both of them, Anakin and Obi-Wan, they're actually technically Sith lords. Obi-Wan has been a Sith lord for quite some time because he defeated Maul, and Anakin just became a Sith lord when he killed Dooku. And the reason that they're Sith lords is because in this version of the universe, the way that you become a Sith Lord is by taking the title from somebody else. And according to Lord Riven, this is the way that it was done before Darth Bane made up the whole rule of two thing. It used to be actually a rite of combat, and when someone killed another Sith Lord, they would accept the title. And there were a lot more Sith that way, and that's why the Guardian slash the Ghost of Lord Riven prefers this way of doing things, is because the rule of two is like, there's not enough Sith, we're never going to accomplish anything with only two of us. So now Anakin and Obi-Wan have to try to come to terms with this whole thing. Like, what does this mean that we're Sith Lords and we feel different in the Force to each other now and all of that? And they also have to try to explain this to the Council. And they also have to try to explain it to Padme too. And so when they're going through this whole process, they also are realizing that they do have to kill Palpatine because obviously Count Dooku, who he was a Sith, they kill him in a Sith temple. Because he had a teacher, they're like, we got to get his teacher too. There's a Sith infiltrating the Jedi. So they go after Palpatine after trying to make sure for quite some time that it really is him. And they're sure that it's Palpatine. They're closing in on him. But then Palpatine kidnaps Padme, takes Padme back to that Sith temple. So then Anakin and Obi-Wan follow them there because Anakin can sense that that's where Padme is headed. And the three of them, they confront Palpatine. And when Anakin and Obi-Wan are fighting Palpatine, Padme asks the ghost of Lord Riven, she's like, get me a weapon or something. Like, I don't think they can take him on their own. So he gives her a blaster and she shoots Palpatine and kills him. And so now Padme is a Sith Lord.
That was so unexpected.
Yeah, that was crazy. It's hard to say that without laughing because of just, it's completely bonkers in the best way. And
Yes.
yeah, so and then now they're all Sith Lords. And so now it's like a Skywalker tradition and Ahsoka is made a Sith Lord as well. It's a Skywalker tradition to become a Sith Lord in this way because there are some benefits, like now that Anakin and Obi-Wan technically have a Sith Lord title, they can work with Sith holocrons and other Sith artifacts for like the greater good. They're able to actually like decipher some of these ancient teachings and things like that. So there's a reason that it makes sense to have a Sith title. So now it's a Skywalker tradition to go to this temple and defeat each other in combat. Not kill each other, of course, just defeat each other. And then they get the Sith title. And then that's the end of the story.
We do get a little fun thing at the end where they're like 50 years later. And that
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
my
yeah.
favorite part.
Okay, see, that's what I meant by Skywalker tradition, but then I just realized I left a part out, which is this is the cool legend summary. Thank you for the reminder. The cool little legends mention that we get is that Jason and Jaina are also kids that go and do this rite of passage as Skywalkers. So,
Yep. And we get the scene where they're bringing their little cousin Ben to go also become a Sith Lord. At, I don't know
yeah.
how old he was, little.
Yeah, so it's Jason. If you're not familiar, if anyone here hasn't read a lot of legends, Jason and Jaina are Leia and Han's kids, and then Ben Skywalker was Luke's kid. I don't think it said who his mother is, right?
It did not, but you have to assume that because they stuck to everything else. It was probably Mara Jade.
Right, right, right. Okay, cool. So yeah, now that's the actual end.
Yes. What else to say about the writing and the plot? Oh, it was written in third person, so we get a lot of the first part of the story is done by this Lord Riven, and you get his perspective of it. He started with his version, like his view of things, and my goodness, is he my favorite character in this entire story. Like this random made up guy just becomes like just such a sassy, I don't know, delusional old man.
And it's so funny because he's completely misunderstanding like what they're doing. He's like,
Yes.
"Oh, of course, Obi-Wan is the Sith Lord, and he's teaching Anakin to be a Sith." And it's like that's not what's happening at all. Like,
No, not at all. He's so confused.
even though there's so much evidence to the contrary that that's not what's happening, and these are actually two Jedi, Riven is just like going with it.
Right. He's like, "Oh, of course. Back in the day, we didn't. This whole red lightsaber thing's only been around for the last couple hundred years. Of course, they have red or blue and green. That's just normal."
Because they're true Sith who
Right.
became Sith through rite of combat, not this rule of two nonsense. So
Yeah. What do you call them? Banites or something?
yeah, I
Yep.
believe that was the term that was used was Banites because of Darth Bane. So
It took
yeah.
me some time to really put together that word. I thought there was a word that I just never heard of. I was like, maybe I'm just, oh, I don't know, not smart enough for this word. But then it eventually hit me, like when Bane and Baneite was in the same sentence. I was like, oh, all right, it's fine.
Yeah, I guess the followers of his rules. But yeah, I thought that was one thing that I really liked about this fic is like that the sort of difference between those two different ways of thinking and the way that we kind of get to explore that a little bit through Riven's character because it's easy to like with Sith lore being what it is, it's easy to kind of like forget that there were Sith that probably had different sorts of views on how to do things and like what was actually the most effective way to teach and what was the most effective way to structure the order. So it was cool to see that touched on a little bit here.
And then towards the very end, then we get to see how that kind of influences the Jedi Order to also have new changes and opinions on how things will go. But we'll get to that later.
Yeah, we're getting
So
sidetracked.
characters, sidetracked. Yeah. So the characters that we see, we mentioned a couple. There was Obi-Wan and Anakin. Riven, which is an original character, I think.
Mhm.
We get to see Ahsoka, Rex, and Cody, and that's where that you get to your like Clone Wars soul gets a little bit warmed up. It's great.
Yes.
And the author does such a great job keeping within character for the most part.
Mhm.
I love Yoda in this. Every time we get to see that playful side of him, and then the author does a fantastic job, like really putting that in there.
I feel like almost any time Yoda makes an appearance in a fanfic, it's always super fun.
Yes, yeah,
Like,
they
it
never
almost
make him
always
serious, and
works. Yeah.
yeah, the only time it doesn't work is when someone's not very good at like getting the Yoda speech down,
Which
and
that
like
would be
it just
hard, so fair enough. Yeah.
yeah. We also had Windu, who was just as grumpy as usual. Padme, we see her often. Bail Organa. You put in here that we briefly saw Mon Mothma. Was that when was that? I know they
It
talked
was
about it.
like yeah, it was, like, hardly for a second. It
Oh,
probably
okay.
wasn't even worth really even putting her on this list because it was literally just a cameo, but he introduces them. There's a moment when they're going to the Senate this is when they're trying to track down Palpatine. They go to the Senate and Bail Organa introduces them to Mon Mothma, and then they move on. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
As mentioned before, there was Ben, Jaina, and Jason popped up at the very end, and then they name dropped a bunch of people at the same time, but it was fun. There's so many characters, and being as long as the fan fiction was, it didn't feel rushed or forced. It all just kind of fit in perfectly.
Yeah, it felt like a natural progression of events. Like, of course, they're gonna have to go tell Padme, and then of course they're gonna have to go to the Senate. And like it felt like everything was necessary. It didn't feel like there was anything that felt like out of place.
Right. And the author had time to set up the next scene and what needed to happen, which you'll see in like a professional book. Sometimes you'll read fanfic and like things just kind of happen and you have to like try to keep up. But no,
Hmm.
they really set up how things needed to happen and the characters' thoughts and then how it played out.
So, as you were reading this, so in addition to some of the good stuff that we already touched on, what sorts of thoughts or like did you have anything that really like stood out to you as you were reading this?
We talked about how much I enjoyed Yoda. He just was so silly. Um, so the author, the way I said before, like they were able to set things up and move things through the story, and it was so well done that I cried. So there was a point where we didn't get to, because of the series of events that actually happened in canon, we didn't get, like, Ahsoka ended up leaving the Order. Well, in this story, Ahsoka doesn't leave the Order, and we get this like in between, Palpatine dying, and then we jumping forward to seeing the kids. We get this tiny scene where Anakin is just waiting outside while Ahsoka is doing her final trials as a Padawan. And then like I'm gonna cry talking about it. It was just so sweet to to read that how that would have gone down in the author's eyes.
And also, I feel like it even has even more weight thinking about some recent canon stuff that has come out lately. Like, I'm thinking about like Rise of the Red Blade, where there's a scene in that novel where it's like when the Padawans are made Jedi Knights, they don't even really get to have that much of a ceremony. They're all just, I mean, there is a ceremony, but they're all just kind of like hustled through because of like they need them for the war, and a lot of them weren't ready. There wasn't that much thought put into it. And it was just really sad how the whole thing was handled in canon. So
Yeah,
it's
it was
nice
like
to see.
how you'd see like a high school ceremony. It was like, and these people have graduated. Congrats. Go to war.
Yeah, it was just very impersonal. Yeah, that's a great comparison because it was not personal at all. And yeah, so it was like really nice to see an actual, nice ceremony for her that which she deserved when she was ready to become a knight, not pushed before she was ready. So, yeah, it was a really nice scene. So, okay, for me, I did notice as I was reading this, I kept thinking to myself, everybody in this fic is like very understanding of each other and trusting of each other. Like, there's not nearly as much like, are you sure? And we don't think, and like that that type of stuff that you see in the prequels. There's not nearly as much of that going on. There is a little bit of it. Like, it's not completely everybody's fine, but everybody just trusts each other way more. And there's times where like you see Obi-Wan is not making the same mistakes that he makes in canon either. Like, he's very encouraging of Anakin. He's very quick to brag on Anakin to other people to the point where he's actually embarrassing Anakin, which is hard to imagine because, Anakin's very full of himself. So he must be bragging on him a lot to be embarrassing him. So yeah, I was just noticing like, wow, everybody in this fic is very just like they just kind of see the best in each other rather than being skeptical of each other all the time. So that was really nice to see that version. Yeah, and then also I was thinking about too, so there's a big part in this fic where once Anakin finds out he's been made a Sith Lord without meaning to become one, he has this whole moment where he's like, what does this mean for me? Like, I know that I have issues with the dark side and like I don't want to be a Sith. Like, how do I come to terms with this? And he's forced to actually really think about this and really think about what this means for him. And I feel like him being forced to go through that process, it helped him not fall to the dark side later on. Because these issues were thrust upon him when he was in a better frame of mind to deal with them, rather than these issues being thrust upon him when he had just lost everything. So, I thought that was
Yeah.
really cool as well.
I liked that the author allowed for Obi-Wan to know that Padme was his wife. And he really got to have that support system that you need when you're trying not to turn to the dark side.
Right, yeah, and he got to have Padme support him in a little bit more of a public way too. I mean, obviously not super public because it was still somewhat of a secret, but it wasn't like he had to hide her quite as much. So it's like you said, he had the support from Obi-Wan and then also was able to probably get a little bit more support from Padme since she wasn't such a secret. So that was really cool.
Do you think Obi-Wan was more supportive of Anakin in this fic and was less critical of him simply because he was a Sith for so long that maybe it was influencing him in some way that changed who his canon personality would be?
That's interesting that you bring that up because there was a line that did kind of make me stop and think. And it was when there's a moment where Windu obviously is kind of not trusting Anakin, and Obi-Wan notices it. And Obi-Wan asks Anakin afterwards, he's like, has Windu always treated you like that? Like, why am I just now noticing this and I haven't noticed it before? So I almost wondered if that was, like, touching on something where it's like now that he's aware of the whole Sith aspect, now he's actually seeing things differently. Yeah.
I didn't understand where the story was going with why Obi-Wan would suddenly start seeing it more. Like, cause nothing changed with Obi-Wan, everything changed with Anakin. So I was confused by that, but just left it alone.
Maybe because he became aware of it or something,
Yeah, I guess if you know where to look now. But
but
they kind of made a big deal of it in the story. They kept bringing it up how he's suddenly seeing it, and like it was a something to do with the transition. But
maybe it is kind of like what you were getting at, of like, because I have realized that I'm a Sith Lord too, I really don't have a place to be being hard on you.
yeah,
And neither does anybody else, type of thing. I don't know.
no questions for the author.
Things to ponder.
Did you have any other reactions and thoughts while reading?
I would say those are probably my main ones. Yeah, just I felt like a lot of these characters they were almost like a little bit more evolved versions of themselves that we see in canon. So it was cool to see how that kind of played out with like if a tricky situation like this was to come up and everybody was a little bit more not so distrustful of each other, then how might that have gone down? And I feel like they handle it like way more effectively in this case. Did you have a favorite scene?
Ooh, the last scene is my favorite to see the kids because it's not only just because we get to see the kids that in Legends, but I really enjoyed Riven in this scene where it was just like he's like, why? All he wants is for the Sith to come back to power and to rule the galaxy. And why are none of them doing that? And then, like, one of the kids is like, "Oh, don't worry, we'll get there. We'll get to ruling the galaxy eventually."
Just telling
He-
him what
I,
he wants to hear.
right now, and I can just in my head see this like old man ghost, just like, and just like having to do whatever it is that he had to do as a guardian, but he has no power other than that, and he's just got to watch these kids now come running in to become Sith also.
And they don't actually really care about being Sith. They just want
No,
like the perks of the title.
right? It's a Skywalker thing, so like we got to go do it.
I would say mine, okay, I'm just building off of your Riven thing. Riven was probably just the highlight of this whole fic for me. I don't even know if it's any
Yes.
particular scene with Riven that's standing out to me, but just I guess I mean, I really did like the impression that Riven made at the beginning when they show up and Riven really thinks that this situation is very cut and dry when it's just not, and Riven
Yeah.
is just completely misinterpreting everything, like, that for me just had me laughing, so I feel like that was probably my favorite because the misunderstanding goes on for so long too, to the
I think he
point to
was in
where
denial.
Yeah, to the point to where Riven even gives them a mission of like, you have to go kill this other Sith Lord that's doing things the wrong way because you're the true Sith. And they're like, okay. Like,
All right, old man.
yeah, like yeah, all of the Riven stuff was great. So that's probably my favorite.
All right. So, did you see the way that it ended coming where suddenly they're accepted into the Jedi Order as Sith, and eventually a Sith is running the Jedi Council? Did you see that all coming?
No, I didn't. I did not expect the council to ever really accept all of this. But I guess, like, maybe because of that whole scene where Yoda meditates with Obi-Wan and Anakin and, like, really, like, looks very deep within their, like, souls or whatever, and can see that they're not actually of the dark side. Maybe that's enough to, like, convince the Jedi Order that, like, "No, this is okay, it's not a big deal, like, it's just a title, and there's perks to this title, they can help us with, like, cracking open these Sith holocrons and stuff like that." So I didn't see it coming, but I guess that whatever happened with Yoda not finding any evidence of like the full on dark side in them, it was enough for them to just let it go type of thing. Do you ever think so? I mean, back to what we were saying about Riven being like, I want y'all to take over the galaxy. Do you think he ever got tired of all that and like stood up to them? Or do you think he just took it like forever?
He's kind of delusional, so I think he's probably still holding out hope. Just one day they will. Maybe it's these little kids. They'll just
Just
rule the
forever.
galaxy someday.
Because he does have the power to, like, set off the traps in the temple like he did to Anakin at first.
Yeah.
He did that in, like, the first scene, which he wasn't trying to kill Anakin, he was just trying to kind of catch him off guard, I guess, but
Guide him to where Dooku was so that he could become a Sith. I guess he
yeah.
could, like, get upset and set off a trap. Oh no. And get the kids all trapped somewhere, but he doesn't want to, probably doesn't want to do that because the only true Sith, these are their children. Like that wouldn't go well for his plans.
That's true. Yeah, because if you kill the kids of the only true Sith, you're really not doing your job very well, so
Yeah.
that's a good point. I guess he just maybe eventually he just learned to live with it.
Yeah. I mean, he's dead. It's a long time to piss everybody off.
Yeah.
How do you think that Ahsoka became a Sith? I would like that story. Do you think maybe like she had to battle Anakin, or I don't know? What's your theory?
I'm guessing that probably what happened based on the way that scene left off. It does happen off the page, so I guess there's no way to confirm this. But the way that that scene left off, you could tell they're about to go to the temple, and I know Anakin was going. Was Obi-Wan going too?
Probably. I don't
Probably. I don't know if it's said, but I just assumed that she had some kind of a spar with Anakin in the temple cuz according to the rules of the temple, you either have to defeat someone in the temple. You don't have to kill them, but it does have to be a sincere defeat, or you can kill, well, defeat a Sith in the temple, I mean, or you can kill a Sith outside of the temple. So it's either kill outside the temple or defeat in the temple. So I could see maybe her and Anakin sparring and then maybe she defeats him. But then I'm like, how would Ahsoka be able to sincerely defeat Anakin at
I was
this
thinking,
point?
yeah, I was thinking maybe Padme, because Padme is technically a Sith, and there's no way
Padme's an
she's beating,
easy
right?
Padme's an easy fight.
Like, yeah,
Just
but
give Padme
also,
a stick or something.
yes, but she is pregnant at this time, so I think Anakin would probably
Oh yeah,
have an issue.
that would not be good. Because it has to be a real fight. That's I guess where it turns into a little bit of a tricky one is because it has to be a real fight and a real defeat. So, man, I thought you had it with Padme a second ago. I was like, that must have been it. But she was pregnant. I don't think that's a good idea.
No, because uh, Jason mentioned at the very end that it can't just be with it has to be with real lightsabers, It can't
Oh,
just be
yeah,
like,
yeah, you're right.
but it
Huh.
doesn't have to be because Padme shot Palpatine in the head with a gun.
But she killed him.
It's true.
So that's another. But the duel, if it's a defeat without a death, it has to be lightsabers. It's a very complicated system. If it's a defeat without a death, it has to be a lightsaber, or you can kill them however you want. So
All right. I still want that scene. I would like
yeah,
a cut scene of just that.
yeah,
So,
because now I get where your question's coming from. Because now I don't know. Because at first I just assumed it had to be Anakin, but then once we started talking about it, I was like, how would she have defeated Anakin in like any sort of a true way
yep.
at the height of his power? And she's still like pretty young at this point. So yeah, I don't know. I got nothing.
I'm gonna make it in my head. Probably distracted him somehow. Like, hey, look, your wife's in labor. Obi-Wan's
Oh,
killing your woman.
that'll do it. That'll do it. Your wife's in labor. Yeah. And knowing Anakin. Well, what are we reading next month?
Okay, I'm so glad that you asked. I looked like an idiot picking this because I read so many different descriptions and I finally found this one. And it's going to be the best. It's going to be fantastic. We're going back
Oh
to
no.
explicit content. It's going to be
Okay.
great. Okay, so this story is called Flyboy by gluten_full. We will link that in the description too, so you guys can read it along with us. It's a short one. It's only like 5,500 words. But it is a Din and Luke Skywalker pairing, and it's a story about how Din saw like Luke Skywalker's hollow thing in to like trying to bring people like one of those like recruitment kind of things. So it was like Luke Skywalker's pinup pictures trying to bring people into the rebellion, and he was thinking about how that would be the only reason he would ever leave the Mandalorians. And then we flash forward 10 years to when now we've done all the stuff in the Mandalorian universe, where now he has to go find the Jedi that is going to raise, Grogu and teach him, and finds out it's Luke.
Oh my gosh. So he had a celeb crush on Luke, and
Yes.
then they crossed paths in real life.
Yes. And it's apparently supposed to be a little steamy or something.
Although we'll
I-
see, because there have been times where we thought it was and then it wasn't, but we'll see.
Well, they tagged some things that would make me think at least something is happening.
Okay, cool.
It's going to be the best. I'm so excited.
Okay, so we are on Instagram, which is One Hell of a Fanfic with a period in between every word. That's where we post when our episodes are coming out, what we're reading next, if you want to follow along, all of that good stuff. And then we also are on YouTube. So pretty much our recordings, we post those on YouTube if you like to watch video while you listen. And our YouTube channel is just One Hell of a Fanfic. Awesome. Well, we will see y'all next month. And thanks for joining us, y'all. Bye, guys. Thanks so much for joining us at One Hell of a Fanfic. On this podcast, we discuss Star Wars fanfiction, but we do not own the rights to Star Wars or any of the written works we cover. We have no affiliation with Lucasfilm or the fanfic authors we credit for their work. For questions, please email us at onehellofafanfic@gmail.com.